I think it's time to start the program, the formal part of the program, if you can get any more formal than eating, because that's kind of my favorite part of the program. But, you know, wars are fought by, come this way, Paul. Yeah, come this way. All right. Why don't you grab a chair right up there? Are you okay? Okay. You know, wars are fought with equipment and by airplanes and things are kind of exciting, but ultimately I used to say the ultimate piece of warfighting equipment are my soldiers. That's what wars are fought with. People, living, breathing, thinking people, and that's my ultimate warfighting piece of equipment. The best, I think some of the best things that we can do is to hear these stories from those that lived it. And we got quite a great panel here today that's going to talk to us. We got, of course, we got Henry that flew a mission on Christmas Eve, 1944, when a time of peace, you know, you're in war. We got Iris that, you know, she's a war bride from Britain. She's going to tell us a little bit how life was in England. We got Albert, who was deployed also 8th Air Force in the early years. We got Richard down there, that was a British Royal Marine that he was, you know, during the hard times in London and England when they were being bombed. And that's even hard for us to even grasp that our homeland would be bombed. You know, he was celebrating Christmases during that time. And then finally you got Dick down there on the end that flew a Christmas Eve mission also in support of the Battle of the Bulge. But to kick us off, just to get it real started here real quick, one of our new people, we're going to call him a new member right now, Paul Crawford, that was in the 14th Air Force in China, said, hey, I got a quick story about Christmas. Won't take but a minute, and I'll tell it, and then we'll get to our panel, because Paul didn't have any idea that he was going to be on the panel until he showed up today. And I said, you got to have a story about Christmas. We all got stories about Christmas. And he said, yeah, I got a quick one I'll share with you. So we'll start with Paul.
Okay. Well, first I want to thank y'all for having me. And secondly, I flew Mustangs in the China-Burma, India theater, Flying Tigers, not the AVG. We came in after they did. They lasted about 6 months. Their first mission was flown Christmas Day. I had a couple of friends who flew with them, and they were disbanded. The first mission was Christmas Day in 1941. They were disbanded in July of 42, taken into the Air Corps. But anyway, 14th Air Force. I had two brothers. One flew B-17s in Europe. His first tour was in B-26s, and he was moved into, transferred into B-17s. Those that I met one fellow a minute ago was dumb enough to be a tail gunner, and also in the military. You couldn't get in and out of that thing. But the Christmas story is, I walked in, I was shot down, and took me about 3 weeks to get out. They flew me out in the middle of the night. But I walked in the house at home Christmas Eve, and the two brothers were there, the two pilots. And there were three of us. I had been missing in action, and we drank enough liquor. America's Georgia at that time was dry. We drank enough liquor to kill 40 people. And I think we stayed up till about 5 o'clock in the morning, so that's my Christmas story. I can't remember most of it.
Paul, that's an outstanding Christmas story, and I would expect no less from a fighter pilot. Okay, and I expect no less than a fighter pilot want to keep the microphone.
Well, I want to say one more thing. You know, our generation was called the greatest generation. The greatest generation to me was my parents' generation. My father was a railroad man. I and Sam Hill, they clothed, fed, housed, educated 7 kids during the height of the Depression. And they came up through the Spanish-American War, World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II. That's hard to beat.
Paul, I appreciate you sharing that with us. And the reason why I like hearing stories like that is because we we know we're in difficult times right now. And I've told people all the time, hey, our country's been in difficult times before. We got out of those, we're going to get out of this one. With that, we're going to continue with the godfather of our society here, Henry.
Thank you. I've got a real Christmas story. It involves Christmas Eve, 1944, and Christmas Day. Roger Freeman was probably the greatest 8th Air Force historian that ever lived. A British farmer, but he lived next to an air base, and by the time he deceased, he knew every man, name, rank, serial number. It was amazing. And he coined the phrase, the mighty eighth, and mighty they were. On December 24, 1944, the 8th Air Force put up the largest aerial combat mission in the history of aviation, which can never be duplicated again. Over 2,000 bombers and 936 fighters in the air at the same time, the same day. And the reason it can't be duplicated is really dollars and cents. $1 million would have bought about 5 B-17s. A B-52 cost $60 million. Can you just see a government buying 2,000 airplanes at $60 million? They bankrupt. But this story happened when Adolf Hitler's forces made their final move to drive the Allied army back into the Channel. And they darn near got away with it. We got caught flat-footed. It's called the Battle of the Bulge. We went to briefing that day, and we were told that our target would be the German airfield at Bockenhausen, where the German fighters were giving ground support to their infantry. It was, if ever was, a maximum effort. That was it. I have before me a copy of the program handed to the pilots, aircraft commanders, the high squadron, the lead squadron, the low squadron, and the first and only time I ever remember a composite squadron of anything that would get bombs in the air. Some of these composite aircraft had a turret that we used for training. It had one gun and one camera. In the ball, one gun and one camera. In the tail, one gun and one camera. But it could get bombs in the air, and it was indeed a maximum effort. In briefing, they said, General Fred Castle is going to come over and lead today. And he has a reputation of never leading anything but a rough mission. Let's hope we can break the jinx today. We'll go take our bombs out and come home. You'll be over enemy territory approximately 1 hour, which is short. I guess you could say it like that poem was the day before Christmas, and not all through the sky, not an Allied fighter could be seen in the air. Because normally, you pick up your fighter escort 5 or 10 degrees after you cross the enemy lines. But the Germans, sometimes I think we underestimated them. They were pretty smart. They came over on our side. I had the armament crew set in my turret, the ball, creep. If you hold your hands up like this all 8 hours, all the blood runs out and your arm goes to sleep. So my turret never stopped turning, ever. And I don't say this, I flew every mission I ever flew riding a ball turret across the target. Most ball turrets, gunners came out. But my argument was that if the Germans are going to stop you, they're going to stop you on the bomb run. You better be ready. As we were going across Belgium, as I said, this creep in my turret keeps it turning. And I got to the 3 o'clock position, and I hit the push-to-talk button with my foot, ball of pilot. And ME-109 just went down through our squadron, and another one, and another one, and another one. We are under enemy attack. So I really rotated quickly to 12 o'clock, the nose. General Castle's number 3 engine was on fire. never really understood what he was trying to convey other than probably his radio was out. He put his gear down, or Harriman did. He was flying it. And after a few minutes, he pulled it back up. I can only assume that was a signal to the deputy lead to take over. Because as soon as he pulled his gear up, he moved out of the formation, and that's the last time we ever saw him. He was killed. Paul Berry was a bombardier on that aircraft, and he and I became good friends over the years. And he said that in the citation, General Castle was awarded the Medal of Honor, and that he had issued an order, don't take this wrong, to not drop the bomb because of over friendly territory. But who would he tell? The bombardier. And the bombardier says, after those 4 fighters came through our squadron, I never heard the general voice on the intercom again. 5 of them bailed out and 4 survived. 1 was so badly injured he died the next day. That's the only mission I ever flew that I thought would be my last one. My bomb group lost 114 young men. In 15 minutes. No long drawn out, pass after pass. And I remember thinking, well, what the hell, how long does it take to die? 20 seconds, 30 seconds? Well, if I'm gonna die, the Santa Claus won't have to find me in the morning because I won't be here. But I'll take as many of those SOBs with me as I can. Now, I hasten to add here, the use of the letters SOB is not what you may be thinking. My connotation, where I come from, SOB stands for Some of the Baptists. I have never seen as many parachutes in the air. My co-pilot had his oxygen shut out, and we jury-rigged some stuff in the hoses all over the airplane, because from 10,000 feet up, you're on oxygen. And if you lose your oxygen, in 5 minutes you're unconscious, in 15 minutes you're dead. But I did not see how anybody could survive. And the reason our fighter escort wasn't with us is like I told you, usually you fall across the enemy lines 5 or 10 degrees, then you pick up your escort. But the Germans came right around us and got behind us. And I remember seeing them coming, I thought it was our escort. I said, what the heck are they doing with their landing lights on? Well, it wasn't our escort, there wasn't landing lights, it was cannon fire coming out of those German wings. Our low squadron had 2 aircraft to survive, and they were so badly wounded they crash landed. General Castle Air Force Base in California was named for him. He lived up to his reputation. He never let a milk run. And then we come Christmas Day. Well, the CQ, charge of quarters, comes around and wakes you up. You're going on a mission today. And there wasn't much enthusiasm for a mission after what we'd just gone through the day before. But the Air Force, it's another day, another mission, let's go. I don't remember where we were supposed to go, but I went down briefing with the personal equipment, got my parachute, oxygen mask, heated suit, put it in my A3 bag and went outside. It's snowing like mad. I threw it up on the truck, and just as I threw it on the truck, the tannoy did a red flare from the tower, mission scrubbed. I pulled it off, put all the stuff back in my locker. The Catholic chaplain was there, and my flight engineer, waist gunner, and myself. And the chaplain says, let's walk back over to the mess hall and have breakfast again. And that's exactly what we did. That was Christmas, 1944. What made it so sad, I knew some of those young fellows, I'd gone through basic training, gunnery school, OTU, wound up in the same group but not the same squadron. It was tough. And I used to call my crew every Christmas Eve for nearly 70 years. There's nobody to call anymore. I'm the last man standing. But my daughter, back in those days, you paid by the minute that you talked. She gave me an AT&T card. She said, nowadays, mother can fuss all she wants to, but you can call your crew and talk as long as you want to. And I did. That's the only Christmas that I ever left away from my family. And Christmas is sort of a special time for us. And I think back of those wonderful guys. It's hard to even talk about. But I take my hat off, I salute them.
Wonderful job, Henry. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I know, Henry, for me, on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, I'll be remembering you, brother. I'll be thinking about you, and I'll be thinking about, and you know, the best thing we can do because I used to, you know, I was in the Army for 26 years, spent a lot of Christmases away from home, some in combat, some in peacetime. And I used to tell my family, the best way you can remember soldiers and those that are following is just remember them. Just think about what they did. And then the very best thing you can do is just live your Christmas to the very best of the ability. Loving your family, loving your friends, loving your country. And if you'll love them and appreciate that and live the best life you can, then you've paid, then our sacrifice, their sacrifice will not be in vain. So thank you, Henry. All right.
I want you people in this room to realize that this is my personal opinion. I love every one of you. You become my family. It's personal. Anything that hurts you hurts me. And that's the way it's going to be, as long as I'm living.
Thanks, Henry. The next story is just as beautiful. It's Iris is going to tell it. Iris is a war bride. Her and her sister Joan. Her sister Joan married a sailor. Iris married a pilot from the 8th Air Force. Their family lost both girls when the war was over because they both got married and came to the United States. And I've talked to Iris and Joan before, and I've said, tell me about how life was in London during the bombing, you know, during the shortages, during the blackouts. And they've told me about, because they said, our parents wanted life to be as normal as possible, so they'd let us go to dances, and they've talked about walking home from the dances, holding the torch, which was the flashlight, straight down, walking in the middle of the street through London, and I'm like, why'd you walk in the middle of the street? Why'd you walk on the sidewalk? And she said, because the wee beasties were on the sidewalk. I'm like, what are wee beasties? She said, those are the big rats that lived in London. She talked about going to, Iris and John told me about how they would go to their mother worked at a pub, and they'd go to the pub to help out. And how one day they went and the pub was gone. It had been bombed in the middle of the night. There was nothing there. And then the typical stoic British, you know, upper, you know, chin up, chest out. Her mother just said, one of my favorite pair of shoes was in that pub. Let's just go home. So anyways, I look forward to hearing what Iris is going to tell us about living in London during that time.
Well, one thing I can tell you is I'm old, and there's a lot of things that I should remember. Now I don't. So perhaps you could help me out, you know, by asking me a question, and it would make it easier for me to answer it. But when the war started, I was 15 years old, and I was sitting, it was a Sunday, and I was sitting by the window shelling peas for Sunday lunch when it came on the radio, and it was Churchill telling us that we were at war, which changed everything. Everybody, you know, was never the same. So Christmas, we didn't celebrate Christmas like the Americans, especially during the war. For one thing, we didn't have food. I mean, people were going hungry. So it was a whole different ball game. But I met my husband, anyway, I worked in a company on Regent Street. I don't know if you've been to London, if you know anything about Regent Street, but the place that I worked was next to the Galerie Lafayette. And we could hear this noise coming down the street. And it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, the pubs let out. They closed at 2 o'clock until 5. So there were these 4 Americans, arm in arm, singing at the top of their voice. Because they were drunk. So that was my introduction to the Americans. On the day, like I told you, when Churchill said we were at war, well, it didn't mean anything to me. And I had not met my husband then, but I met him at a supper club, very fancy supper club, in the afternoon, early afternoon. And he was there on his first leave with 2 of his crew. And he was sitting across from me with these American teeth, smiling, you know, like a Cheshire cat. I said to my friend, if he comes and asks me to dance, I'm going to say no, which is a no-no. You never, ever say no. If a fella has the nerve to come and ask you, you know, you have to do it, because otherwise he'll never ask another girl. So anyway, he comes up, walks right past my table. So my friend said, oh, chance would be a fine thing. You were going to turn him down. He wasn't looking at you anyway. He'd gone down to the front where the maitre d' was there in his evening clothes. And he said to him, well, what do you do if you want to ask a girl to dance? He said, you just ask her. Which is what he did, but I didn't know that until he came back and stood at the back of my chair and asked me to dance. And it wasn't until I got up to the floor and I turned around and realized, well, this is who it is. Well, to cut a long story short, I never did anything by halves. There's this handsome American Jew to start with. So that should have been a no-no, shouldn't it? Because he was flying B-17. He was already doing his numbers, you know. So it never occurred to me that anything would happen to him. And it didn't occur to him either, because he wore his dog tag. Can you imagine what would have happened to him if he'd have been shot down? But it never occurred to him. He never, I don't know why, he must have thought he had a charmed life. But anyway, to cut a long story short, we married. We had 3 children. We were married for 68 years. And he's the only person I don't have to worry about. I miss my husband terribly every day of my life, but I know where he is, because he's there with the Lord taking care of him. So if you want to ask me a question, I may be able to answer it.
What if you told my wife about Malcolm's cat? Should have married him.
It was so cute. Malcolm was very handsome. And you should have seen the two of them on the dance floor. Better than Dancing with the Stars. Anyway, he was so handsome. And she said, you know, once in a while I get nifty. And he said, when I do, I just say, Malcolm, put that hat on, let me see when I married you. Because you know, they wore this beautiful crushed hat, and they looked like a model. And she said, Malcolm, put that hat on, let me see why I married you.
Thank you, Iris. Great story. You know, Iris said something about the Americans, you know, here they are, middle of the war, arm in arm, singing, happy, not thinking about tomorrow. And that's something about the Greatest Generation that I think that really captures them, is that they were so positive. My good friend Phil over there has given me a saying that the only difference between inconvenience and adventure, the only difference between inconvenience and adventure is attitude, the attitude. And we can learn so much about great attitudes. Albert reflects that probably as good as anybody in that generation. Albert signed up very quickly after Pearl Harbor. He was a ground mechanic. He deployed as a ground mechanic. He was watching guys come back every day shot up. In fact, they were so shot up there were not enough gunners to go around. He could have stayed as a ground mechanic and never flown, but he said, I'm going to volunteer to be a gunner, and not just a gunner, with a crew I think that had already lost 2 or 3 tail gunners. And I think he just went up, his training, instead of the month-long training that you might have gotten, or several months-long training, his training was, this is a B-17, that's where you sit, that's the guns, this is how you're firing. Like, get in there and go. So anyways, Albert, here you go.
Well, everything he said is true. But you know, I want to tell you about something else. The side of how the English people were reacting and how we reacted to what the English people were doing. Because that's a very important thing that happened and not very many people discuss. When I went overseas on the left Norfolk, Virginia, on the Queen Mary, on the first day of September 1942. We got to England on the 5th day of September 1942, and then the next we spent the night on the boat, and then in the morning we had breakfast, an English breakfast. And imagine what we had: a piece of very coarse toast that tasted like it was about half sawdust, with baked beans on the top of it, and 1 strip of bacon, and a cup of coffee. That was our breakfast. That was our introduction to English eating. And, you know, needless to say, I wasn't overly happy with the way that worked out. But, you know, that's the way it was. There's not a damn thing I could do about it. Nothing. Because I was one of a group that was subjected to a lot of things that we didn't like and weren't used to. But you know, we had to put up with it, and we did. Okay, then I went on my first mission, which I was ill prepared for, on the 20th day of December, 1942. And I think all of you have heard my story before of how I got on combat crew. Okay, on that mission, we got shot up holy hell. And I'm telling you, it was rough. We had 2 engines out. We had the tail of the airplane where I was in was all shot up and was bouncing up and down like this very rapidly and very roughly, to the extent that for the next several days after that mission was over, I was sore as could be, because I'd taken a real beating just from the vibration of the plane. Okay, I've gotten off a little bit of the story I was going to tell. Go back to the beginning of it. Because the crew I was on had been shot up a number of times, and I wasn't on it at that time because I was the 3rd tail gunner on a crew. And we got a 3D pass to go to London. And when we got to London, you know, things were rough in 1942, in December of 1942. And so what did we went to a restaurant, and I can't remember the name of it anymore. We went to a restaurant, and can you imagine what we had? We had fish, and it was very well prepared, but it was a piece of fish, just fairly small, and a piece of bread, and, you know, beans, had some beans with it too. And because that's all they were having at that time, because the Germans were torpedoing many of the supply ships. And, you know, they made do with whatever they had. And we were largely living on the same thing that you English people were living on at that time, on what we could get, which wasn't much. So, you know, it was a great experience during that time. And as I said, we went to London and had this very strange meal, and we enjoyed it. We liked it because that was all the food we were getting. The English food that we were getting supplied was very limited and of very rough quality, because our supply ships were not getting over to England with a lot of supplies at that time. Irish can tell you, it was a damn rough time. And I completed my 25th mission on the 22nd day of June 1943. And on my first mission, we were all shot up, and all the other missions in between, we got shot up, and not real bad service or anything like that. And then on my 25th mission, we got the holy hell shot out. To this day, I'm very affected by the way that we got shot up and we got home. We were very, when I say home, back to the base in England. Okay, that's enough of my story. I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Albert. You told some stories there I haven't heard before. I appreciate you sharing with us. Our next speaker is going to be Richard Sadler. He is another one of our British citizens. He is our resident Royal Marine, which he's the only one I've ever met. Well, I've met some Royal Marines, but none from World War II, and none that landed on D-Day. So, Richard, it is an honor to have you as part of this group, and we look forward to hearing your story.
Thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Merry Christmas, everybody. And Albert, I can remember very well when you bloody Yanks came over to England. It was the bloody Yank invasion. Everywhere you looked, there was an American uniform.
The damn Yankee.
Yeah, no, not Yankees. No, I know what a Yankee is. I've lived over here for 55 years, so I know what a Yankee is. A Yank, please. And I can remember, like I say, very, very well. And of course, immediately, of course, my sister, 18, same age as me, when the war broke out, 14. And by the time we got through the first 2 or 3 years, I'd been putting out fire bombs and throwing hand grenades and all that sort of stuff in the defence force. But that was good training. I eventually learned by the fact that by Christmas of 42, I was told that when I was 18 years old, I would have to sign up for service. Well, I did not want to join the army because I lived outside an army barracks from the day I was born, and saw how slovenly they were and disgusting and all sorts of stuff like that, because being a 14-year-old boy, I would penetrate the barracks and ask the soldiers for cigarette cards and sweets and stuff like that, you know. But anyway, by the time I was 17 and a half, I said, well, okay, it's Christmas, I'm going to volunteer for the Royal Marines. Because my neighbour across the street, he joined, he was a year older, and of course he was in a Marine uniform, and pointed out the fact that it was so much different than the army. So I said, okay, that's it. Little did I know that was going to put me on the way to Normandy. But I spent the following year then, because I joined up straight away. So all of the 1943, while I was 17, and then I trained in the Marine Corps, and eventually ended up, after training and volunteering and stuff like that, in landing craft division. So little did I know at that point, I volunteered for the commandos, but you're too young for the commandos. We'll put you in something just as good. So they put me in the landing craft division, and eventually I went through training all the way up to Christmas of '43, just before Normandy. So they sent us all off to Christmas leave, and when you come back, you will go to the east coast of England and join up with your landing craft association. Okay, no problem. So, of course, we enjoyed our Christmas, and the bombing had stopped at that point, and went back to the east coast of England, and sure enough, there was 16 American landing craft, all at anchor. And okay, you guys, you go here, you go there, you go there, like I usually do in the service. So I ended up on a landing craft, and we started going out to sea. I was selected with my mechanical knowledge to be a stoker in charge of the engines. And the engines on the American landing craft were 200, because it's bigger than this, big as these two tables, 250 horsepower grey marine diesels. So I had to know all about those, which I've been trained on. And so at the start of Christmas then, I started going out to sea with 3 other guys, a coxswain and 2 crewmen, and I was in charge of the engines. So at that point, life was getting interesting. Well, you know, I'd done all this training, so now I'm on a proper landing craft. So I always felt very fortunate that we ended up on American landing craft, because they were very superior to the British landing craft that just didn't ride the waves very well. But anyway, out of the 16 landing craft, it eventually turned out that we were getting close to D-Day. Not that we knew, but we just knew something was going to happen somewhere, sometime. So we eventually ended up with 3 landing craft and crews being selected for whatever reason. And guess what? I was on one of them, just out of the blue, out of the 16. So a few days later, okay, you 3 landing craft go down to Southampton. Okay, so that was on the south coast of England. So this is in May. So we just jump on the landing craft, bye-bye, off we go. And when we get down to Southampton, there's all these hundreds of American landing craft, LCTs, LCMs, all waiting for the word. Well, we got there, but the only thing was we were loaded up with high explosives. That was the reason why only 3 were selected. And okay, you guys don't go anywhere near any of these landing craft. You get on the buoy and carry this red flag. Okay, so we didn't think any more about it. But of course, if you get a bullet, TNT and explosives is going to go up. so anyway, 3 days later, of course, we get the word, okay, Eisenhower says for us to go. So off we go, because we came back till the next day, as everybody knows. So then, at that time, off we go then the second day, and of course then we successfully landed on Juno Beach. We were the only one, my landing craft was the only one out of the 3 that made it. And of course, I did read just a couple of months ago that the Canadians, on a history, the Canadian tanks were the only tanks that got as far as they did, further than any other tanks in the invasion. So evidently, of course, what we did with our landing craft, getting the explosives, and the explosives, amazing how they planned this. The explosives were for us to get off the landing craft at the Juno Beach, and that was at Bernier-sur-Mer, and land, get the explosive off to the beach wall, the sea wall, which was about 10 foot tall, and blow a breach so the tanks could get off the beach onto land. And just at one moment, 1 second, just before the thing that changed my direction, was a big Canadian tank came right next to me, my landing craft on the beach, and I was level with the commander, and we looked at each other because we're just a few feet away, and I looked at him and he looked at me, and I had to say, well, you know, so what? And as I turned forward, I could see his cannon raise up, and I looked forward and I could see a big hole in the church steeple just off the beach. And immediately, a couple of seconds later, then of course we were swaying in the rough sea, and then at that point, just as he shot the shell, then we hit the mine on the obstacle, blew up my landing craft, and it started to sink. So of course, what the hell do we do now? You know, we can't fly. So eventually, of course, the landing craft sunk, and my lucky day was then when we came and bumped up next to the control ship, which had a rope ladder on the side, and hey guys, let's go. So we jumped onto the rope ladder, and of course I looked back at the landing craft, and it just sunk below the surface of the water. And I said, well, thank goodness for that, I can't swim. So that was the follow-up from my Christmas Day joining that group, and I've always looked back on that through the years, and I've been very, very thankful that I was on only the one landing craft that succeeded and got through and blew the wall up and succeeded in doing the planning for D-Day. And this last January, was it, when we got the French medal? Yeah. And then we got the French medal this year for our venture in France. Okay, thank you for listening, fellas and ladies.
Thank you, Richard. Richard told me that story before, and I'm like, you can't swim. You live on an island nation. It's surrounded by water. Wherever you go, there's water. I can't believe you can't swim. But they tell these stories, and they're the kind of things that I read the books, I've seen the movies, and I never dreamed in my life that I would actually get to fellowship with people that lived those adventures that I read in the books and saw in the movies, yet they're here. What a treasure they are. Our last speaker is Dick Bailey. Now, Henry and Albert, 8th Air Force, flying a B-17, it's a 4-engine bomber at 30,000 feet, freezing cold on oxygen. Dick's 9th Air Force, also flying out of England, but he's flying the B-26 Marauder, a 2-engine bomber, flying from 10,000 feet, not wearing a mask. You know, it's a little warmer down at 10,000 feet. These guys are doing strategic bombings, going deep behind the lines, hitting plants and ball bearings. Dick's doing more thing what we call tactical bombing. He's bombing at the front lines where the American troops and the German troops are meeting each other. He's in direct support. Dick's flying an airplane that was a great airplane, way ahead of its time, but just like typically the way the Army does, is the Army does, you know, development through soldiers' lives. We'll give them the airplane and they kill enough of themselves and we'll go, there's something wrong with that airplane. Either we need to fix the trainer or we need to fix the airplane. Dick's airplane was the B-26 Marauder. One of the famous places it was trained out of was Tampa Bay, Florida. The saying was 1 a day in Tampa Bay because there were so many of them on takeoff or crashing. It was also one of the first airplanes in Army aviation to get the moniker of Widowmaker. There have been others since then. Just a powerful and great airplane. And if the plane, though, the bomber that flew the most bombing missions is a B-26, and it is at the Smithsonian, and it's called Flak Bait, and it's being rebuilt right now, put together. But Dick's going to tell us one. Dick has a great famous mission, too, that he flew on Christmas Eve in support of Battle of the Bulge. All right, Dick, here you go.
Can I come up and use the date?
You can do what you want to, Dick. Come on.
Put the microphone on the stand.
You are bossy. All right, is there anything else you want me to do?
Thank you, Brett. The reason I want the microphone mounted is being a pilot, I can't talk without using my hands. And I've been a long time pilot. I've been a pilot ever since Pontius was a pilot. Oh. Anyway, I spent 2 Christmases in service. The first one was right after I got out of flight school. I was assigned to Barstow Field, and the only memorable part of Barstow Field in Shreveport, Louisiana, was that we had 4 to 5 inches of snow on the ground during Christmas. My next Christmas was, I was based in France, and at Beauvais, and as most of you probably know, the Battle of the Bulge was started on the 16th of December. The weather was absolutely terrible with zero visibility. Everything was grounded. So the real name of the Battle of the Bulge was the Battle of the Ardennes Forest. But the journalist, because of the bulge in the American lines, named it the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans penetrated very deeply as far as Bastogne. Our job was to take out the bridge at Euskirchen to keep the Germans from bringing up any more troops and supplies, which was on the December 24th. So my mission on the 24th was to take out that bridge. So, if you will, that was my Christmas celebration, to go bomb the bridge and keep the Germans from bringing in more supplies. We were told that it would be a last-ditch effort by Hitler, and as a result, there would be, it would be protected by many German fighters. Typically, when we approach a target, the flak would be, depending on the value of the target, the flak would come up, and when the flak stopped, we were told and looked around that the German fighters would come in. So their air-ground control was pretty good. However, in this case, the flak was really coming up, and the Germans came in. I'm told that there was something over 20 German fighters. After our bomb run, I looked up and over the top of my canopy, I was flying number 3 slot, 1, 2, 3, on the flight leader, his left wing. Over the top of my canopy, I could see tracers coming, and my tail gunner said, "Here they come." And one plane, a German plane, an ME-109, pulled up right over the top of the lead plane, and my top turret gunner was firing away with his twin 50s from the top turret, and I could see him punk. He was close enough so I could see his cartridges piercing the German's side and hitting the engine, which caught orange flame, black smoke, and he rolled over, and the tail gunner said that he just exploded below and behind us. And the tail gunner opened up, and he ended up getting a probable. And about that time, a ME-109 pulled up between me and the lead plane, and we were flying a tight formation, so he couldn't have been more than 30, 40 feet away from me. And I could, we looked at each other's eyes. He had square goggles, unsmiling face, and he disappeared after maybe 5 or 10 seconds. And then shortly after that, I saw a plane, ME-109, crossing from left to right, about 250 yards out in front of us. And I thought, if I get some tracer out there. By the way, the B-26 has 4 fixed firing 450 caliber guns, 2 on either side of the fuselage. So I slid out of formation just a bit, hit the triggers to get some tracer out in his position to let him know that we had that we saw him. And then I slid back in. About the time I slid back in, he started trailing black smoke and headed down toward the undercast at a steep angle, maybe 45 degrees, and disappeared into the undercast. Whether or not he crashed, bailed out, got back to his base, we never did find out. So they gave me a bomber pilot credit for shooting down an ME-109. As far as intelligence knew, I was the only bomber pilot in Europe to shoot down a German fighter. So that was my Christmas celebration. The next day being Christmas, our squadron was grounded because typically it was 4 squadrons in a group. They only flew 3 at a time, and so and the other one was grounded. So since we flew on the 24th, we did not have a assignment on the 25th. And as it turned out, and the weather was still bad, and I didn't get my 65th until the first week of January. But that, the 64th, taking out the bridge at Euskirchen, was my Christmas celebration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Great story. Are there any questions? Anybody want to ask any questions before we move on to the other part of the program? Well, you know who they are, and you can come up to them and talk to them afterwards and hear their stories. Oh, you want to say one more thing? Yes, sir.
I did leave something out. I shot down on Christmas Eve an FW-190. And after each mission, you sat down when you got back to the base for interrogation. And the intelligence officers would ask you what color was the flak. I didn't know they had anything but black, but they claimed there were other colors. And did they fire rockets at you? Did the fighters hit you? And I told this lieutenant, I said, yeah, I shot down. It was textbook framing with a computer sight. And I broke the rules. I didn't fire short bursts, I unloaded. And next thing I know, it was smoke, and then fire came out of his nacelle, and He said, did you follow him down? I said, no, sir, I did not. Well, why didn't you? I said, because there were 75 other German fighters not on fire, not going down, and not only did they deserve, they received my undivided attention. Let's all close with this. You've heard about the British and the Americans and the 14th Air Force. The Georgia chapter had a German general as our guest many years ago, Adolf Galland. He was the chief honcho for the Luftwaffe. And he sat right across the table from me. And I said, are there any B-24 people in the room? I'm safe. I said, General, I know you've been asked this question a million times, but I've never heard the answer. I said, if you were leading a group of your 109s and you looked over here and saw a group of 17s and over here a group of 24s, which would you go after? Ah, the B-24s, they burn so fast.
Thank you, Henry, and Iris, Albert. I appreciate Dig, Richard, appreciate your story so much. Thank you for sharing with me. My Christmas is going to be much more special to me because you shared these memories with me today. A lot of times you don't realize what you got to be thankful for until you hear the other side of the story. And hearing the other side of the story as they tell it, what was happening 70 years ago, makes me realize I have a lot to be thankful for. I live in a really wonderful country and really wonderful times. And it also reminds me though, although we're facing some tough times, we've been through tough times before, and we will get through those tough times because there are people with the same mettle that these people have that are coming up, and I'm looking at a room full of them right now. You guys have the same mettle that these guys have. You're raising families with the same mettle that these guys have, and I know our country's going to be in good shape. Henry's talked before about this being a last man club and the story being forgotten, but I'll tell you the story's never going to be forgotten because they tell us the story, we tell our children the story. My daughter over there is Savannah. Stand up real quick, Savannah. She just happened to be in town. The reason why I want to point her out, she was downtown doing an audition for, I think, a Broadway show. Is that it? Anyway, so I said, well, stop by. I want you to see the luncheon. So she did. She came by here. The reason why I point Savannah out is because she grew up with me taking her to the 8th Air Force Museum, her and her sisters, listening to music from World War II. I can remember when her music teacher was playing music from the 40s, and she said, oh, I know that. That's Accentuate the Positive. Johnny Mercer wrote that. I've been to his house in Savannah. And the teacher was like, what are you talking about? How do you know that? She goes, my dad makes us listen to that stuff all the time. But she knows the story, so that it will live on. It'll live on in my Savannah, and it'll live on her sisters. So these stories are not going to be forgotten. So with that, I want to make a couple more announcements. This Thursday, there's another great group that meets. It's called the World War II Roundtable, the Petite Alberge, the third Thursday of every month. That'll be this Thursday at Petite Alberge at 11 o'clock. Great group. I think Richard goes, Dick goes. I'll be there. So if you want to go to that, just let me know. I'll find a way to get you there because I'm off this Thursday. Paul Crawford, who is our P-51 pilot that's just left, Paul's going to actually get to fly in the P-51 this Tuesday at the Commemorative Air Force. First time he's flown on a P-51 since he got that one shot out from under him. And that's going to be on the news. That's a big story. So you might want to watch that on the news, and you can follow that with the Commemorative Air Force. Our address list is still up here, right here. We only have 6 names on it. We want to get your address, so please hit that before we leave. Oh, these chocolates up here, they look like airplanes. These are really cool. Jennifer made these. Jennifer, you made all these chocolates up here? That was really nice. Thank you for doing that. Let me see, I think I've covered almost, Mark's getting ready to come up, we're gonna do the raffle. You see this stool here that's really nice? See this? No one take that, I want that. No, I'm just kidding. The reason why I'm pointing that out is because, you know the vintage vocals? You know, the vintage vocals that come and sing for us? Mary, who's one of the vintage vocals, works downtown. She told her boss about our raffle, and he said, look, I'm gonna buy some things for it. So we bought this stool, a really great high fly, a couple books, this replica of the B-17 toy, some really nice things. And he said, Dennis went and picked them up from Mary, and he said, I just want to donate to the group for those great people. So I just wanted to let you guys know about that. And with that, are there any other announcements that I left out before we get into the, yes sir, Bruce?
We are recording these, so this is going to be on the blogs for everybody to be able to see in about a week or two.
Perfect. And we do appreciate that because we need to get the story out. So many times I run into people and they go, I didn't know you guys met. I didn't know about this group. But through Jennifer, with her Facebook page, and Bruce, and the word getting out. People are hearing about this, and that is good. All right, I'll stop talking. Mark?
Brent,
Yes, ma'am? Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, Albert. Yes, sir.
With pictures of this, left, will the guy who took the audio for this, he'll have copies for us?
Yes,
Or can we get copies of?
we'll make sure you get a copy.
John says he's gonna make sure it happens. All right, Mark, you're up, buddy.